Thank you all for coming to the first in a series of rebooted tutorial nights hosted by the New Player Mentors. This presentation will aim to teach new players the basics of how to play the starter fleet Task Force Hemlock. I'll do an overview of what Task Force Hemlock is, followed by discussion on how to play Task Force Hemlock effectively. Please save questions for the end, where we'll have a short Q&A before the fight night. First, some acknowledgements. I'd like to shout out Nucleari for helping with editing and getting a lot of the images in this presentation, Hunter for helping edit presentation notes, the mentor team for helping with the presentation, and Tuna for helping set up the fight night. Otherwise, the content and any mistakes in this presentation are my own. What do I expect you to know coming into this? I will not cover the basic controls in the game. The in-game tutorials, particularly the main tutorial and the cruise missile tutorial, will teach you this much better than presentation can, so make sure to do those. In particular, focus on being comfortable with position firing missiles rather than firing at a specific track. Also, the concepts of hard kill and soft kill will come up a lot in this presentation. If you've forgotten, soft kill is any missile defense method that causes the missile to miss, whereas hard kill is any missile defense method that physically destroys the incoming missile. Be comfortable with those terms because they'll come up a lot. Let's talk about what is Task Force Hemlock. Task Force Hemlock is a starter fleet containing a single ship, Totem. Totem is a missile and beam Axford with a mix of cruise, size 3 hybrids, and size 2 hybrids. The cruise missiles give the fleet powerful, long-range offensive capabilities, allowing it to fire at enemy ships while remaining entirely within cover. The beam provides a backup short-range weapon, which transitions to a primary weapon as missiles are spent. The fleet has a salvo size of 6, meaning that most of the time you're going to be launching 6 missiles at any given time. The intended role of Task Force Hemlock is as a backline fleet. In Nebulous, there are generally 3 types of fleets. Frontline, which holds the enemy in place, backline, which kills the enemy that the frontline has held in place, and caps, which maneuver around the enemy to get the objectives. Task Force Hemlock is going to be that fleet killing ships that your frontline has fixed for you. To support that, you have a very wide map presence. You're going to be shooting at targets basically anywhere on the map, and you're going to be staying in cover for most of the game. The beam adds a lot of versatility to deal with ships that may be too strong for your missiles, or too cheap to be worth spending a missile on them. Let's run through each missile individually. There are 5 missiles in the fleet: Ether, Miasma, Filgia, Nazarita, and Psyche. The key differences between them are their size, either size 3 or size 2, their warhead, either HE shape or HEC-P, and their seekers. The size difference, size 3 is going to be higher damage, more expensive, slower, and have slightly higher HP. These are going to be Ether and Miasma. Your size 2s are going to be lower damage but cheaper and faster. Those are Filgia, Nazarita, and Psyche. The warheads, HE shaped, often abbreviated to HEI for high explosive impact, will do consistent medium amounts of damage, roughly in a cone or sphere around where it hits. This is a cheaper warhead type, and this is going to be the bulk of your damage with the fleet. HEC-P, or High Explosive Kinetic Penetrator, does very high damage in roughly a line in the direction that it hits. You can see this diagram here. That means it will do very high damage to a ship if you can hit from the front of the ship to the back, from bow to stern, or vice versa. However, if you hit the short ways along the ship, it will do more disappointing damage. This means that the warhead prefers to be shot at ships that are unable to maneuver. That way you know what direction they're facing, and you're able to hit down the length of the ship. Seekers, there are 4 seeker types in Task Force Hemlock. ARAD Act, this will prefer ships with their radar on because of the ARAD primary. And if there are no valid targets with their radar on, it will go for any ship or chaff that it sees. EO, or electro-optical seekers, will only target ships. This is very powerful and it cannot be decoyed. However, the Blackjack Laser Dazzler, which is a mount that OSP has access to, is able to defeat EO easily. The Act Wake Seeker, because of the Act primary, will go for any ship or chaff. The Wake backup serves to improve its jam resistance. Out of all of the Seekers, this is the weakest one. If you're going to change one, it's probably this. Finally, the Pure Act Seeker on Psyche is a very greedy Seeker. It will go, much like Act Wake, it will go for any ship or chaff, but it's very cheap, and it complements HEC-P in that you're shooting it at ships that are already out of options and are unable to maneuver and unable to soft kill. Going through each missile individually, we have Ether and Miasma. These are our 2 size 3 hybrids. These will mostly be fired in pairs at capital ships as your main damage dealers. In some cases, you may launch them individually. In particular, Miasma, because of the EO Seeker, works very well against small ships or other ships that you know do not have the EO jammer. Filgia and Nazaruda are the size 2 HE-shaped missiles. Much like Ether and Miasma, these 2 are going to be fired in pairs as probing attacks to test missile defense, or as faster missiles to shoot at smaller ships, or at immediate threats where you don't have the time to wait for the size 3s to get out there. Finally, Psyche is our lone size 2 HEC-P missile. This works as an excellent finisher against ships that have already been disabled, so that they are unable to maneuver and unable to soft kill the Act Seeker. In addition, Task Force Hemlock has a beam. The beam is a very important part of the fleet. It does very high damage, but with a long cooldown that you can skip with the battle short command in exchange for damaging the beam. It has a 5-kilometer range, which is fine if you can set up a good ambush profile. However, if you get caught in the open, the beam will not be much help. The beam adds a lot of versatility to the fleet. First, as cap defense, at the start of the game, you can sit near a friendly objective and use the beam to destroy incoming cappers trying to take the objectives. As the game progresses, you can also use the beam to set up ambush attacks against capital ships that you otherwise may not be able to launch missiles against. For example, Ocellos with very good missile defense. It also works excellent as a finisher. The beam has infinite ammo, so it may be more cost effective to use the beam to finish off a ship rather than using your limited supply of missiles. Next, self-defense. If, say, a rocket shuttle manages to break into the backline, many other backline fleets will struggle to stop it, but because of your beam in Task Force Hemlock, you'll be able to easily defeat incoming backline threats. The beam also serves a funny and somewhat effective role in an anti-craft role. Especially against bombers, you can lock and beam a whole squadron of incoming bombers in just under a minute. This is colloquially known as Big Aurora. All right. That's everything about what Task Force Hemlock is. Let's talk about how to play Task Force Hemlock. Here I've put 7 characteristics that I think are most critical to how to play Task Force Hemlock and cruise missile fleets in general. Those are salvo mixing, the technique of using multiple seeker types to complement each other. Target selection, knowing what to shoot at, what not to shoot at, and what missiles you use on each target. Missile pathing, how you get your missile from your ship to the target. Target geometry, how you set up that terminal waypoint, the very last waypoint, to best hit the target. Firing tempo, the pace at which you launch missiles throughout the game. Your beam usage, and team communication. Due to time, we'll just talk about salvo mixing, target selection, and team communication today. I think these are the most important parts of playing a cruise missile fleet. First up, salvo mixing. Salvo mixing is very important. It makes soft kill a lot harder on your targets, and in some cases may make soft killing the entire salvo impossible. As an example, let's say you launch 6 EO missiles at a target. If they don't have that one EO jammer, it's fine, all 6 missiles will hit. But if they do have that jammer, they will jam out your missiles and you will score no hits. Instead, if we launched 3 EO missiles and 3 A-Redact missiles, in order to use the EO jammer, they've likely kept their radar on to see the incoming missiles. So even though they've managed to jam those 3 EO missiles, the 3 A-Redact missiles will be able to hit, and despite them having that jammer, you'll still score 3 hits. This is why salvo mixing is important, because it allows you to guarantee some number of hits out of each salvo. It's not always necessary to do salvo mixing. For example, if you know they do not have that jammer, you do not need to mix in non-EO missiles into your salvo. However, it is generally good practice to assume that a target has every soft kill option available, and you should launch mixed salvos until you know for sure they do not have that type of soft kill. When you're queuing up your mixed salvo, the order of the missiles matter. The first missiles in the list will be launched first, so think about the best order for your missiles to get through enemy defenses. For example, I like to launch my cheaper missiles first, so that they'll take any point defense hits, and then my more expensive, more valuable missiles will be able to get through easier. Also, do not mix size 3 and size 2 hybrids in the same salvo. Size 2 hybrids are faster than size 3 hybrids, which means that if you launch them together in a single salvo, the faster size 2s will pull out ahead of the size 3s, meaning that instead of one big salvo, you'll get 2 small salvos that are both much easier to defeat for the enemy. So when you're launching these mixed salvos, always do either all size 3s or all size 2s. Let's talk about target selection. When you're firing at a target, you should be choosing them based on size, speed, value, soft kill, hard kill, and what ships are nearby. You have a limited supply of missiles, so it's okay to be picky about what you shoot at. You do not have to shoot at every target, and when you do launch missiles at a target, make sure you're using the missiles that are most effective against that. In order to identify these qualities, the ship class can tell you a lot just from knowing the class. For example, over here, in a Salvo class ship, you know is going to be large, medium speed, and high value. The soft kill present on Ocellos is likely just chaff and maybe jammers, but the hard kill on an Ocello is going to be exceptionally good. Over here, a Tug, a Draugr class ship, will be small, fast, and medium value. Its soft kill is likely a chaff, maybe a jammer, and its hard kill is probably just kinetic PD in the form of a Pavise, maybe, and possibly AMMs. So just knowing that this is an Ocello and this is a Draugr, we already know most of these qualities of the ship, so pay attention to the ship class. Additionally, you can watch the results of salvos when they hit the target in order to identify what types of soft kill they have and what types of hard kill they have. Now we'll go into a detailed look of what hard kill and soft kill look like on the target and how to defeat each given hard kill and soft kill type. We'll start with hard kill. First up, kinetic PD. This is Bastions and Pavise. These are a minimal concern. They do not work very well against hybrids. However, in large quantities, they can destroy some incoming missiles, especially size 2s because of their reduced health. You can easily defeat kinetic PD by either saturating it by launching a full salvo of missiles at the target, or with size 3 hybrids, which, due to their higher HP, will be able to get through easier. Grazers are rare but very annoying. They're effectively a single shot weapon, meaning that they can shoot down an individual hybrid, but are very bad at stopping an entire salvo of missiles. Like with kinetic PD, these can easily be defeated by launching a full salvo of incoming missiles. Auroras are the only point defense weapon in OSP's arsenal that you are really concerned about. Auroras are capable of stopping full salvos of incoming hybrids, but fortunately, they are only present on Ocello ships. That is why it's so important to identify the class. It is possible to defeat Auroras, however, they require advanced techniques such as time on target attacks, or modifications to the fleet like adding penetration aids. In general, when you see Auroras, you should just path your missiles to avoid them entirely. Sarissas are also a weapon only present on Ocellos. These are able to shoot down missiles at a long range and can be annoying. However, they are easily defeated by a technique called the Sarissa Wiggle, where you plot a zigzag path like this. That way, by constantly bending the missile's path, it can dodge the incoming Sarissa fire. If you know there are Sarissa present, make sure that when you're plotting your cruise paths, you use a Sarissa Wiggle, and you should be fine. AMMs, or anti-missile missiles, are common in small amounts, typically enough to stop one salvo of missiles, but rare in large enough amounts that they'll change your gameplay. AMMs are capable of stopping an entire salvo until they run out, but because AMMs are so expensive as a point defense method, targets typically don't carry huge amounts of them. You can defeat AMMs by launching more missiles than they have AMMs, or with advanced techniques like doglegging the final waypoint in order to dodge the AMMs. Lastly, craft. Craft are very annoying against missiles. They can stop entire salvos in their cruise stage if they can get close enough. You can defeat craft by avoiding where they are. If you know that there's an enemy carrier, keep track of where their craft are and don't plot missiles near those craft. If they're craft guarding a target, you can surprise the target so that your missiles are able to enter their sprint stage and hit before the craft can get out and intercept the missiles. That's the full summary of every hard kill option that OSP has, so now let's look at soft kill. Chaff is very common. You've almost certainly seen it in your games. You should assume that every ship has chaff until it's proven otherwise. Chaff seduces act seekers very effectively, and you can detect it by seeing it visually. You can actually see chaff even if you don't have a visual track on the target. Alternatively, you can see that a new track has appeared next to the intended target. You can defeat chaff either with your ARAD seekers or your EO seekers. Radar jamming is very common and does something called pre-staging, which you see in this clip here. You see that the missiles are getting a track on the jamming, but they're out of range because the jamming prevents them from getting a range estimate. And so they stage early and self-destruct before they actually hit the target. As mentioned, radar jamming is very common, particularly on craft, and it will pre-stage missiles like that and jam out your act seekers. You can detect it through pre-staging or by seeing your missiles miss for no particular reason. And it can be defeated by putting your ARAD seekers close enough that even if they do stage because of the jamming, they're still close enough to hit. Additionally, EO seekers, or surprising the target before they can get the jammer on, are both viable options to defeat known jamming targets. MCON is a technique where the target turns off their radars in order to deny ARAD a target. This is somewhat common, especially in more skilled lobbies, which should be able to MCON relatively effectively. As a bonus, when a ship turns its radar off, it does degrade that ship's PD. For example, point defense methods like PVs or command AMMs generally require either that ship's radar or a friendly ship's radar to be on in order to be effective. So forcing the ship to MCON may allow other missiles to get through their point defense network easier. You can detect when a target has MCON'd because your ARAD missiles miss by going for chaff, and you can defeat it with your ACT Seekers, EO Seekers, or by surprising a target before they can MCON. Decoy containers are a technique that's typically only seen at higher skill levels because they're rather finicky to use. Their benefit over chaff is that they seduce both ACT and ARAD seekers. You can see when it happens because a new track has appeared next to your target that has seduced all of your ACT and ARAD missiles. And you can defeat it either with EO seekers or by surprising it before they can get the decoy container out. Killjoys are a related technique which is a size 2 missile with a jammer in it. For Task Force Hemlock, it is effectively the same as a decoy container. It is a higher skill method that defeats your ARAD seekers. EO jamming, as we've talked about, the Blackjack Laser Dazzler, is relatively rare. A lot of people don't bring it. However, when they do bring it, it will very effectively jam your EO seekers. This will cause pre-staging and misses, the same as radar seekers get jammed by radar jamming. And you can defeat EO jamming with any seeker that isn't EO. Okay, that is every soft kill method that you really care about in Task Force Hemlock. So now we'll run through a few examples of target ships and what process I would go through to determine what missiles to launch at each of these ships. First one here, let's say there's an enemy marauder, a liner. We don't know what soft kill looks like, but we know it has a lot of flak. We see here, this is what flak looks like. I'll give you guys a moment. Think about what missiles you would launch at this target. Personally, I would launch a mix of size 3 hybrids. Because we know it has kinetic PD in the form of flak, we want to use size 3s against it. And because we don't know its soft kill details, we want to do an even mix of our two size 3 seeker types, ARAD ACT and EO. So I'll be launching a full salvo of 3 ARAD ACT size 3s and 3 EO size 3s. Next up, a monitor ball. Let's say there are 5 monitors flying in a formation. We know they have a radar jammer, we know they have an EO jammer, and we know that they have some kinetic PD in the form of Pavis or bastions. What would you shoot at it? I would launch either 6 ARAD ACT size 3s or 6 ARAD ACT S2s. I know that monitors don't have very good point defense, meaning that the choice between size 3s and size 2s is going to be based on what I have available and how quickly I want this target hit. Because it has an EO jammer, I don't want to use my EO seekers, and because of the radar jammer, I don't want to use my ACT seekers. So I'm going to be doing full salvos of ARAD ACT in either size 3 or size 2. When you're launching these salvos, make sure to put the terminal waypoint close so your ARAD seekers won't pre-stage. Next up, let's say it's later into the game and you've detected a new track going for one of your friendly objectives and you're pretty sure it's an enemy shuttle. We don't know anything else about it, just that it's going for a friendly objective. What would you launch? Here you have a choice. Because it's a fast ship, we may want to use size 2 so it can't outmaneuver our missiles. In that case, we would want to do an even mix of ARAD ACT and ACT Wake size 2s because we don't know its soft kill suite. And additionally, when we're launching these missiles, we do want to surprise the target so that it's less likely that we'll successfully soft kill the salvo. We're launching a smaller salvo of 4 missiles because that will probably be enough to defeat the shuttle, and we don't need to launch more missiles than we need. Alternatively, if we want a salvo option that defeats soft kill very well, but is slower and maybe outmaneuvered, we can do 2 EO size 3s instead. This is another option that may be better if we know exactly what cap it's going for, so we know it cannot outmaneuver our missiles. What if we see an Ocello pair? 2 Ocellos, we don't know what soft kill looks like, but we know it has Auroras and Sarissas on both ships. And let's say they haven't really taken damage throughout the course of the game. Think about what you would launch. I would say just don't shoot at them. Your missiles are more valuable than being wasted against a Cello PD for maybe 1 or 2 hits. Just launch missiles at another target that is less well defended. Alternatively, if you really need them dead, you can sneak up to them and ambush them with the beam. Potentially, you can damage one of them, perhaps destroying its point defense. And if they get far enough apart, you can then use missiles to fully destroy the one that you've damaged with the beam. What if there's a damaged liner? We know this liner has been heavily damaged, and we know because of the red lights in the bridge that its power is out, its reactor is gone. Because of that, we know it will not have any soft kill, and we know it will not have any hard kill. What would you launch at it? In this case, I would launch a salvo containing our HEC-P missiles. I prefer launching our 2 HE-shaped size 2s in front of our 4 HEC-P missiles. However, alternatively, you could launch all 6 HEC-P missiles. So here I would launch 1 ARAD Act, 1 Actwake, and 4 of our Pure Act HEC-P size 2s. Because we know it can't maneuver, and because we know it has no soft kill, our HEC-P will serve as a very good finisher against this target. When we're plotting our salvo, make sure to figure out what direction it's facing, and launch so that your missiles are going down the length of the ship. All right, that's all the examples I have today. Let's talk about team communication. Team communication is very important in Neb in general. Join Discord VC or talk in-game chat because there's a lot of information that will really help your team if you communicate it. Things you want to know, for example, are priority targets. You can just ask your team, is there anything you want me to shoot at? You want to know where our cellos are. You want to know all of that info that we talked. You want to know all that target selection info that we talked about. They can also tell you about possible threats like incoming rocket shuttles. And if you're too busy to watch a salvo, you can ask your teammates to watch it for you and tell you the results. Things your teammates want to know. If a teammate is on a missile fleet, they want to know the same soft kill, hard kill, value information that you do. So communicate it to them. Ocellos are powerful ships on OSP, and you're probably paying closer attention to their locations than the rest of your team. So if you see an Ocello doing something weird, tell your team that. You can also tell them what ships you've damaged and ask for follow-ups against that ship. Guns also work as good finishers against damaged ships, so you can ask your team, hey, can you finish off this ship? I've heavily damaged it with my missiles. You can also provide general situational awareness for the team, and as an advanced technique, you can ask your team for jammer support for your salvos. Jammers will suppress target point defense. So if you coordinate your missile salvo with a friendly jammer, it may allow you to get your missiles through targets that otherwise have 2 good hard kill options. All right, that's it for today, and now I'll open it up to the Q&A section. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and I'll read it out and answer them. And the fight night will be starting in 15 minutes, so stick around for that. Yes, Lark, I think the size 3s are very slightly longer range than the size 2s, but they are basically the same range. Plane airplane, what is the difference between a red track and a yellow-orange track? How does missile validation work? An orange track means that one of your teammates has marked it priority. This is the same way that you mark a track killed, but instead you mark it priority. So there's no in-game meaning, but it may be it's a way for your team to communicate information about a specific track. The way missile validation works, Task Force Hemlock doesn't actually have any validators. But for other missiles, missile validators mean that when the primary seeker sees a target, if the validator would also correctly see that target, it will give it a thumbs up and it will prefer those targets rather than ones where the validator does not get a valid track on the target. For example, an act ARAD val seeker, it will go for anything that the act seeker sees, but will prefer the targets that the ARAD seeker also sees, so targets with their radar on. Vanny, when designing fleets in shipyard, the advice I see everywhere seems to be bring Omni soft kill. Almost everyone brings tons of soft kill options. So if someone brings a lot of soft kill, it can be very annoying. A lot of soft kill options do require some amount of micromanagement from the player. So if you can surprise the target, a lot of people will fail to soft kill. So if you notice that a target is doing MCON and making your ARAD missiles miss, you can put your missiles closer so they don't have the chance to MCON before the missiles get a track. Alternatively, jammers can get destroyed throughout combat. So if a ship has too many jammers for you to deal with, you can wait for it to get damaged by friendly ships and then finish it off with your missiles. What is the difference between square and diamond tacks? That is basically how long you've had a track on them. I believe diamonds mean that you've had it for longer and that you've identified some amount of information about the track, whereas the square means it has just shown up on radar. Cheese, as this is a fleet you would recommend to newer players to learn cruise missile role, are there any tweaks I would do to improve or alter the performance of the missiles? So Task Force Hemlock, I think, is a very effective way to learn how to play cruise missiles. It teaches you how to do salvo mixing very well. If I had to make one change to the fleet, it would be change the act wake missile to act wake validator. That is the one change you can make. It will change nothing else about the fleet, but it will help a lot. Mr. Train, if you're being chased or pincered by multiple squads, what would the best course of action be? Run? I don't know. If you're getting caught out, run and ask for help. Fried, would it be better to saturate enemy targets, or with Hemlock is better to be more surgical and strategic with the use of missiles? And how do you source a wiggle with TRPs? So you don't really source a wiggle with TRPs. There's some ways you can do it with specific missile tunings. However, generally with TRPs, you are just going to die to Soris's. For the first question, it depends what they have. Um, You do have a decent number of missiles. It's okay to just launch salvos until the thing dies. Yeah, I would say it depends on the target's hard kill and soft kill, and whether there are other high value targets. Core, wouldn't it be better if the Wake Seeker on Nazarita was Validator? Yeah, basically. The benefit of the Wake backup is that it means that your Act Wake will not pre-stage. That is what the Wake backup does. It will not pre-stage when jammed. When do you recommend start pushing for points with the beam? I like to play Hemlock very aggressively, which means pushing basically as soon as I know I won't die from pushing. For a newer player, I would say once you're at about half of your missile stockpile, you should start thinking about where you're gonna go to use the beam. Vanny, last waypoint's close. Playing around in the practice yard and accidentally sent my hybrids too close to not stage at all. What range do you want your last waypoint to be at? I have a very bad habit of doing exactly that, of putting my hybrids too close so they get shot down. I would say try to put them maybe 500 meters from their seeker range. The size 3s have longer range seekers than the size 2s, so I forget exactly what it is, but check it in the fleet editor if you want exact numbers. Tech, how useful is target reference points versus pathing manually? I would strongly recommend learning how to path manually. Target reference points, as mentioned, are very vulnerable to Sarisas, and they give you a lot fewer options for pathing your missiles. The main use of target reference point, like Star said, is for command missiles. Cheese is their biggest threat or consistent danger when you're playing Hemlock. The biggest annoyance is Ocellos, because they are basically invulnerable to your missiles until they've been damaged. Alternatively, the biggest actual threat to your ship is probably craft. You don't have great craft defense besides the beam. So if an enemy carrier is really intent on finding you and killing you, there's not a whole lot you can do. Pika, how do I know how many salvos to shoot at a single ship? Yeah, that's a good question. Shoot it until it's dead is kind of a short answer to that. For a larger ship, you should be shooting at it until it stops maneuvering. That's usually a good sign that it's crippled. For a small ship, usually one full salvo will kill it. But in general, if it stops moving, it's probably dead. Vanny Ether says stage trigger on target detection direction only seeker. So that means it'll stage at the maximum range of the seeker. Yeah, like Star said. So at 3 kilometers, it'll stage. Why doesn't the EO Seeker have a wake backup as a go straight device? It's free to add. Is it just the Star Fleet restriction? You'd have to ask a hunter for that. Um, adding a wake backup to the EO Seeker is a good way to improve the fleet. Yeah. Why doesn't Hemlock use a parallax instead of the bullseye and frontline? Wouldn't it be cheaper with just a parallax? I think Hemlock is tight on power because of the beam. I forget exactly. That might just be wrong. If it isn't tight on power, that might be a good option if you want to improve the fleet. Nuclear, what is the approximate amount of time / beam cycles required to kill common OSB ships? Most small ships you can kill in a single beam cycle, maybe with a little bit of battle short. For larger ships, it will take quite a while. Monitors will take, I don't know, 5 beam cycles, depending on where you hit it. And anything larger than a monitor, it'll take a very long time, and it depends on where you're hitting it. We're coming into the last few minutes here before I hand off to Tuna, so again, any final questions? Thrawn, I'm pretty sure it's AVO, but you'd have to ask Tuna.
We'll be doing AVO, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Alliance versus OSP for Pikachu.
Fine, you can probably make a parallax work. Again, if you want to make that modification to Hemlock, feel free. I prefer it with the front line and bullseye.
No. Use them as is, please.
Vinny, what do you do about flak? So, well, there's two types of flak. There's the flak from 100mm guns and flak from bastions. Flak from 100mm guns are kind of a non-issue, although if they're giving you a problem, you can Sarissa wiggle, and that'll work. In real games, your targets probably don't have good line of sight to shoot down with flak. But yeah, the Sarissa wiggle works on flak as well. Lark, yes. Sarissa wiggle, I have a slide on that. Way back here. There we go. It's this kind of zigzag path to dodge long range fire. Typically, when if you're roughly perpendicular to the target, a zigzag works. Like everyone's saying, if you're launching towards a target, corkscrews are better. Alright, it's time for the fight night, so I will cede the floor to Tuna.